in this matchup, Joe Burrow versus Tom Brady, who do you got and why?
Okay, I'm going to go with your boy. I'll go with Joe Burrow in this one. I've got no faith in Tom right now. And that's no slight against how he's played the last couple of weeks. It's just offensively, the Bucs have been a dumpster fire this year. They struggled to even score 20 points. And when you look at the last game that they just played against the 49ers, Kev, it was 35 to nothing at one point. They were getting blown out. And I understand that the Bucs offensive line has had their issues. Tom hasn't been as good this year compared to years past. But I just have no faith in this Bucs offense to be able to score enough points to get this win. It's one thing if you're scoring 20, 25 points and you're falling short in that regard. Kev, they can't even get out of the teens. I mean, some games they can't even crack out of the single digits when it comes to their offensive point totals. And until they put more points on the board and they start stringing along some drives where they're not just settling for field goals, they're actually scoring touchdowns. The Bucs are going to be a subpar or mediocre team as far as I see it. And with them going up against the Bengals are one of the hottest teams in the AFC right now, and you could even say in the NFL to a larger extent. I mean, Joe Burrow, they had a nice bounce back win against the Browns last week, simply just because in the first matchup that the Bengals played against the Browns earlier this year, the Browns smacked them. The Bengals gave up 30 plus points in that game. Jacoby Brissett looked amazing in that game, and Joe Burrow and that Bengals offense couldn't get anything going. But really, since that loss, the Bengals have turned it up a notch. They've beaten some great teams along the way. They had their biggest win a couple of weeks ago against KC in a really close battle. But when you can knock off Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, that just really kind of goes to show how effective they've been the last couple of weeks. And going up against the Bucs in this one, I think they have plenty of opportunities to get some points on the board, simply just because I think that Bucs defense is going to spend too much time out there on the field because the Bucs offense isn't going to be able to get third down conversions to string some drives along. And I will say, when it comes to the Bengals defense, I think they're going to be able to effectively lock down this Bucs offense to around 10 to 14 points because the Bucs have just shown me time and time again they cannot be trusted to get 20 points plus. And I understand they got the GOAT. I understand they got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and some other pretty solid receivers. You could also add in Julio Jones there as well. But I think the Bengals could hold them to teen digit numbers. And I think as long as Joe Burrow doesn't turn the ball over and gives Tom Brady ample opportunities to cash in off of those turnovers, I think the Bengals win this one fairly comfortably. I think there's a very good chance that the Bengals could put up somewhere around 20, 25 points. This isn't a game where they need to put up 30 points plus and they have to win in a shootout to get this dub on the road. I don't see that happening. I think as long as the Bengals get somewhere around 20 to 25 points, I think that'll be more than enough to win. And I think, when you look at Joe Burrow, you got Joe Mixon in the fold, you got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. They just have the targets to work with here. And I think, Tampa has a pretty solid defense. Last week it didn't show because Brock Purdy just basically blew them apart. Christian McCaffrey tore them up on the ground. Deebo Samuel made some plays as well before he got hurt. And I think Tampa, when it comes to their defense here, they're going to be stretched they're basically going to be stretched to their back heels at this point because those Bengals players, I think, just have those one-on-one matchups to win at their disposal. And I think more times than not, the Bengals are going to get those one-on-one wins. And I think that's really going to be how this game is going to play itself out. I think when it's all said and done, I think the Bengals win this one probably by about 10 points. They could potentially win this one by 14 plus, depending on how bad that Tampa offense plays. I think if I had to put a score on this one, I'm going to say the Bengals win this one by the score of, let's say, 23 to 13. I think Joe Burrow could put up two touchdowns on the board. I think they'll get some field goals probably in the second half to extend their lead. And I think they'll be able to force some turnovers potentially against the Bucs. Maybe one interception or two from Tom. But by and large, I think it's mostly going to be the Bucs are not going to be able to move the ball effectively against the Bengals defense. And all the Bengals have to do is lead a couple drives down the field to get some touchdowns on the board. And I think that's going to be the difference maker. When it comes to Tampa, they got to prove to me that they could score. They haven't been able to do that the last couple of weeks, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. There's too much incompetence as far as I see it with the Bucs here. I think the Bucs lose this one fairly handily, and I think with that said, the Bengals would improve to 10-4 on the season as far as I see it. So, Kev, the floor is yours from here on out, bro.
Dude, To me, this is a blowout. For the sheer fact, hear me out. Third string quarterback last week, right? Absolutely annihilates them. Defense contributes as well. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it was just Brock Purdy. But Debo gets hurt. Christian McCaffrey has to shoulder the load. Ayuk only has like, I don't know, like 50, 60 yards or some odd thing like that. We're talking about Jamar Chase, Boyd, Hurst, and Higgins. Joe Mixon, Joe Burrow. One of the best offenses in the league. And the 49ers won by 28. I'm trying to let the audience think here. If the 49ers can do it with a lesser offense and a better defense, albeit, again, I understand what I'm setting up here. I need people to understand how powerful offense is in this league. If they're scoring at a fast pace, at a high clip, whether or not Tampa eclipses 20 points, that defense is not stopping Jamar Chase and those boys. That defense is not going to slow down Joe Burrow and the confidence that they have right now, the swagger that he presents. Are you like? I need people to understand how difficult it is to slow this offense down the way that teams need to because of the potential of one of the three-headed monster receivers going off. If worse come to worse, the receivers are having an off day. The Tampa rush defense is not what it once was. I mean, Christian McCaffrey went for like what, over 150 total all-purpose yards last week? Hand the ball off to Joe Mixon. He's a pass catching back too. Let him get 150, 160 total yards. I mean, it's going to provide the same outcome. It's going to provide the same result. These offensive players that the Bengals have, as long as the offensive line holds for the Bengals, are arguably some of the best players in the league. I would argue that this is probably the best receiving core in the league, and it's not close. The Bengals have an opportunity to take control and really seize the moment and continue to fight for the AFC North, where the Buccaneers have no definitive identity. Are they the injured Bucs? Are they the incapable Bucs? Are they the offensively inept Bucs? Are they the defensive struggle, allow 50 points a game Bucs? I don't know what we're getting here. I know that they had a close comeback win against the Saints, but that's not really saying much when Andy Dalton is their quarterback and they're not really winning any games as well. But when you go up against good teams, the Buccaneers look like crap. Prime example last week. I don't necessarily know how people can make this a closer game than what we're kind of interpreting here, but I got the Bengals by like 14 points, bro. Realistically, if this were to get out of hand by the third quarter, maybe even before halftime, I would not be surprised. Again, this is no slate to Tom Brady, but he has regressed this season, not only because of the lack of offensive line and protection, but because you can make the argument timing of the throwing is off, relationship with the receivers is off. I mean, decision making is off, but we have talked about this a multitude of times, and I'm not going to go into the tangent. When you don't have time to throw and your offensive line is consistently getting beat, I mean, Kyle, what's that offensive lineman's name? Donovan Smith?
Yes, sir.
We're talking about the worst guard in
Tackle.
football. Excuse me, the worst tackle in football. You can look up the numbers yourself. He's absolutely atrocious. But because of the lack of depth that Tampa has, the only option. So when you leave players like that on the field and you expect them to protect the greatest quarterback of all time at 45, the results are going to be pretty obvious. So I got the Bengals winning in a blowout fashion, probably somewhere along the lines of maybe even 35, 38 to like 14, 17 points. I really do think that this Bengals offense is too high powered, and the Bucs are going to have to force it down the field, and that's going to create turnovers and problems for Tom. So I got the Bengals moving to 10-4 as well.